Welcome to Learn with the Nerds, Excel to Power BI. My name is Allison Gonzalez. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer here at Pragmatic Works, and I'm excited to take you on the journey of bringing in data to Excel, probably your favorite, the nearest, the one that you're in all of the time, and showing you how you can level up your data game by utilizing features in Excel that kind of aren't that common, even though they've been there for, at this point, close to decades, and they're incredibly powerful. And those features, of course, are the Power Query Editor and Power Pivot. Now, in order to show you these features the best, I'm going to bring along two other trainers with me, Angelica Choo Quan and Emily Taylor, and they're going to help me out on my data journey of taking that raw data in Excel, bringing it into Power Query Editor to clean it up, taking it into Power Pivot to do some data modeling, to do some other things. We're going to talk more about Power Pivot because it's really underutilized. Not a lot of people know what it is or even how to get that program. We are then going to continue our data journey right on over to the Power BI desktop. So we're going to talk about what is the Power BI desktop, how does Power BI work with Excel. We're also going to go to the web version of Power BI and talk about collaboration, sharing reports with others. And then our final thing that we're going to do is we're going to work in reverse. We are going to take data that's in Power BI and then show how you can utilize that data in Excel. Now, to come on this data journey with me, you're going to need two things. So you will need to have the desktop version of Excel. So make sure you have the desktop version of Excel because you are not able to use Power Query or Power Pivot in the web version of Excel. So to follow along with me today, you will need that desktop version. You will also need the Power BI desktop. Feel free to pause this video, get those downloads done, get that stuff loaded up, ready to go, and then just come back here, unpause me when you are ready to follow along. I hope you're excited to go on this journey of taking our data from Excel to Power BI. Let's get started. Hey, Emily, thanks for coming in and helping me with this data.
Happy to be here.
It's not looking great. It's kind of spread out. You can see it. It's not the greatest.
No, it's not. So as you can see here, we've got some data from 2023 and 2024, but this data has a ton of columns, one for every single month. Not really optimized for getting sums and so on. So we're going to do some transformations to this data set by going into the Power Query Editor. Are you ready to get started?
I'm excited for this. We know formulas. We do a lot of formulas. You have a whole class on formulas on our on-demand.
I do. Yeah, but we got to get this data in a better shape so that we can apply some of this.
Because it would be such a lot of effort to do a lot of formulas on here because we'd be working so hard and essentially doing a lot of unnecessary work if we wanted to do formulas to convert this, where we can just do it easier in Power Query, which is my favorite part of Excel.
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive on in. As you can see, we've got some categories here with some financial totals based on every single month. So in order to get this transformed so that we've got some more rows instead of columns, we are going to go ahead and click on the data tab up here in the top of Excel, and we're going to go ahead and click Get Data to enter the Power Query Editor. Now, as you can see, I've already got this worksheet pulled up. So I'm going to go get my data from other sources, and I'm going to click from table and range, and it should go ahead and auto select the cells inside of my worksheet that I'm currently in. I'm going to click OK.
And we're pulling in 2023 first.
Yeah, that is correct.
We can see we only pulled in 1 year so far, but we can bring in the other year pretty easily too, right?
We sure can. So once we're here in the Power Query Editor, something to note, we are actually in a whole entire different window. We're going to be doing these transformations to our data, and then we're going to get our data back into Excel. So in order to just avoid some confusion, I'm going to go ahead and open this up full screen. Don't accidentally click on the other data. So here in the Power Query Editor, we've got our table 1. I'm going to rename that right now. It's
Probably a good idea.
a little confusing. I can either double click right here and rename to 2023, make sure it's matching the right year. Or right over here on the right hand side, we've got a properties in our query settings, and that is also the name of our query that we're currently on.
Microsoft loves to give you options of where to do stuff.
We're going to go ahead and bring in 2024 before I apply any of these transformations, because I want to make sure these are matching. Everything that I do to one table, I'm going to want to do to another, because in addition to getting this data all into a bunch of rows, I also think it'd be beneficial to get all of this data onto one worksheet.
That would be so convenient. That way you're not flipping between two tables. It's all in one space. So much easier to get really good insight.
So we're going to go ahead and click on New Source here. And this time we're going to bring in data from a file. We're going to grab it from that Excel workbook that we were just working in.
That's so convenient because this also allows you to bring in data from anywhere. So if you have this stored in multiple files, it's a great way to be able to bring all your data together into one.
That is right. All right. And I've gone ahead and saved this to the desktop. So I am going to bring it in. It's our Excel to Power BI. And I'm going to go ahead and click Import. All right. Now you can see the Excel to Power BI worksheet or workbook that we had, but you can see both sheets. We already have 2023 data in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just select 2024 and click OK.
This is so fast. And this is so sad to me because Power Query is amazing. It works so quickly, but so many people don't realize that it's here, that it's a part of Excel, and it's been here for well over a decade. Maybe 2 decades at this point. It's been a while.
So my favorite part about the Power Query Editor is this applied steps over here on the right-hand side of the screen. So the Power Query Editor does not have an undo button, and there's a reason for that.
It's a little scary at first.
Yes, that's one of my favorite things to do is undo whenever I make a mistake. But as you can see, there's not one here. But the applied steps is my favorite part because this is a running list of every single transformation that you do to your data. So you're able to keep track of the transformations that you do. And then as your data changes over time and more data comes in, your new data is able to receive all of these same transformations, and you don't really have to think about it later on. So
it's so good. You could just, if you do the wrong thing, every time I just do the Control Z to undo it, it doesn't work. Just hit that X. It's all gone.
Yeah, you can remove steps that you do if you make a mistake. You also, if it's a step that has a couple of different options, this gear icon is really handy because it will pop up a whole window for you to make modifications to that step you did.
So seamless once you know what you're doing in here.
All right, so as you can see, now my queries, both of them are in here, 2023 and 2024 data. It's still really long though. I want to apply a transformation that's going to get my data into rows. So I'm going to start on my 2023 query, and right here with my categories column already selected, I'm going to right click and I am going to do what is called unpivot other columns. So I want to keep my categories column still a column, but everything else I want it to turn into rows. We're going to go ahead and click on pivot other columns and see what happens.
That is so awesome. It will just flip flop. So we now have everything that was our headers is now in that attribute column, and everything was that corresponding cell is now our values. And so it's all synced up. It's okay that we have now a lot of rows, and we can see that row count in that bottom left corner, but that's okay that we have those repeats because now it's so much easier to do any manipulations we want on our data.
That's right. We're going to go ahead and apply the same thing to 2024. You're going to notice because I do want to turn this into one query eventually, I want to make sure that every transformation I do to one, I do to the other. That way it matches identically. I'm going to go ahead and again, under that categories, right click and unpivot other columns.
Love it.
Same stuff, different query. All right. Here in our 2023 query, the next thing I want to do is, you notice I've got my month out here, but I don't have a year column. I know that my query name is based off the year, but I don't have a column to link to this year if I were to get these to
That would be helpful for sure.
Yes, I'm going to add a column in here. This is the nice part about the Power Query Editor is there is some code involved right up here in this formula bar. It's called M. If you're great at writing M, you can. Or there is this graphic user interface where these buttons up here, you can do a lot of these transformations by just a click of a button.
It makes it so easy for the average user, especially coming from Excel, who maybe knows some formulas, but even if you're not comfortable with formulas, you can click buttons and you get 99% of what you want done that way.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and click the Add Columns tab. And I said I'm bringing in a column that it has the year, so I'm going to go ahead and create a custom column. And I'm going to name this custom column right here, year.
Like a good naming structure.
That's right. And then the only thing I'm going to do here is type in the year because every single row in this data set is from 2023. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And just like that, I've added a year to all of our rows. So I went ahead and added the year here because I actually want a column that has dates. Okay. So January, I'm going to assume all of this information is going to be from January 1st of 2023. I was going to pick the first of every month, but I want to build a column that shows that. So
if, for example, they are tracking their data and they actually have a date, fantastic. If it's not the first and you want it to be a different day, you could always put it in another column just like we did with the year, and they could put that date in there.
Yep. All right. And now that I've created my year column, the next thing I want to take a peek at is this data type right here. Power BI went ahead and did a good job of determining the data types for the rest of our columns, but our year we want to adjust to be a whole number. And while I'm at it, I'm actually going to go ahead and adjust the data type for our values because this is financial data and this is actually currency.
Awesome.
All right. I'm going to go make the same transformations to 2024. Go ahead and create a custom column, name it year, and this time 2024. Change our data types to a whole number and our value to a currency.
Now, just a little reminder for all of you following along at home, if your program is running a little bit slower than ours, you get stuck on a step, don't forget you can pause us, rewind at any point in time till you catch up to where we are at.
All right, let's head back to 2023. As you can see, I've got my month as well as my year. I want to build a column here that's got January 2023 combined. I'm going to go ahead and just assume that my data is going to start with the first day of every month.
Yeah.
So this column, I'm going to use this button called Column from Examples, another great resource in Power Query Editor because you can build an example and the Power Query Editor makes guess about what you are trying to build. And let's just give it a try. See what it does.
I love a good AI feature that gets built in.
All right. And just like that right here in this cell, I'm going to build my example off what is highlighted in green, the row that I'm currently working in. I'm going to go with January. And I want it to be January 1st. And I'm going to add my year 2023. I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And as I said,
like jazz fingers.
I say a guess, but you're right. It is an AI feature. The Power Query Editor is able to determine what you are trying to build in this column.
And we can see the code erase. We didn't have to write any of that. It's great, like you mentioned, if we know that code, we have series here on our YouTube about that, where if you want to dive into it later on, you love it, fantastic. But if you don't, we can see that code got written for us. You just wrote exactly what you wanted to see in that cell. It looked at it, wrote that code for us on the back end, and then it iterated over all of the rows of the table, and boom, we got what we wanted.
Yeah, this last step before I actually add it to my table is I do want to rename this column right here. I'm just going to double click where it says merge, and this time I'm going to name it date. Click off of it, double check everything looks great. I'm going to go ahead and click OK to get this to apply to our table. All right, and just like that, our applied step says we inserted our merged column. All right, and we're going to change our data type for our date right here. We're going to change it to our date. All right.
So awesome. I love Power Query.
Yes, we're going to go ahead and jump on over to 2024 and apply all of those same things. I'm going to create a column from example and type in my January 1st of 2024.
Well,
January 1st of 2024. Going to go ahead and click enter. Rename.
do the spirit fingers each time.
Rename my column to make sure it matches what we've got going on in our 2023 table. And click OK. All right, last but not least, we need to change our data type to a date so that everything is matching.
Awesome. All right, so we now have 2 tables of cleaned up data. They're set up identically. They have the same column structure. And our goal, right, is to see these into one. So talk me through the options for combining our data in the Power Query Editor.
Yes, so a lot of times people say, let's combine our data. Let's merge it all together. So there is a merge option if you want to bring your data together. But in a data set like this, where we've got column structures the same, data types the same, the better option is to append our tables together. And what an append is where we take one table and we essentially bring all of the data from the other table and drop it in right underneath it. So we're just making this table a lot longer.
The key here is having matching column names.
That is right. We're going to start in 2023 and click the Home tab. And instead of Merge Queries, that is where the Append Queries option comes into play. I'm going to click the drop down because personally, I like to keep my original tables there kind of as backup.
Same.
But I can keep them there and append my queries as a whole new table or whole new query altogether. So I'm going to go ahead and select Append Queries as new. I'm going to select the 2 tables that I'm bringing in, 2023 and 2024. Go ahead and select OK.
Ooh, so we kind of have a problem here. We have 2 columns here. Now, everyone that's following along with us in the live chat, drop in there what you see the problem is, because this is something that happens all the time. So we wanted to replicate that for you all so you could see the process of fixing this, because so often you will bring in files and you're staring at them and you're like, they look identical. Why do I now have a second category column? You can see we have category for all of 2003. And then if you scroll down, well, there's our category for 2004. And you can see we have nulls. So something is up with that category column where the categories didn't go together. We can see attributes all the way, value, years, dates, all of those worked out perfectly. But the category, anyway, what is what's wrong?
Taking a little closer look, data error entry is a classic case of data error entry. Our column names look like they're the same, our data types are the same, but it looks like we've got a misspelling right here, category spelled wrong. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to the original. That is right. We got to go back to 2024. I need to type in the correct spelling for this column. I'm going to go ahead and retype that. And the cool part about this is everything that happens in the Power Query Editor, these transformations and the applied steps, but also all of your appends, your merges, anything like that, it goes ahead and applies it as you're working through it. So let's go to this append file that we have.
Fingers crossed.
And just like that, we've got our categories for 2023. I can scroll on down here, make sure there's no nulls for 2024. Instead of building that whole separate column, Now
So
we have our
it's,
categories.
what is so nice is that you can go back to the original source, fix any of those problems that you might not have realized in the beginning, and then our output is good to go.
Yeah. Last but not least, I want to rename this query. I don't love the name of it. Append one. Let's go ahead and rename it to our total for
Total years is good.
total years.
Yeah, it's like total years.
Total years. There we go. And now that we've renamed our query, the last thing that we want to do is get this data with the new query into Excel. So we're going to go ahead and look at this close and load button we've got going on right here. I'm going to hit the drop down because we have two different options. The first option is close and load. The other one is close and load to. Sound very similar, but there's some differences here. Close and load is an option if we're trying to get our data straight back into Excel. It would work for something like our data set. We're only looking at 144 rows. Yeah. But if you're watching, drop into the comments. Does anyone know exactly how many rows? What's the row limit in Excel? Allison, you wanna spoil a surprise?
1,048,000 and some change.
Okay. So that being said, if I was appending years and years and years worth of data,
It'd be easy to hit that for sure.
yes. So in our case, close and load would work because our rows are limited. Close and load to would be a great option because you could just load your data straight into Power Pivot. We're going to cover that in the next
Exactly. Yeah. And it gives you lots of options. But if you do the wrong one at first, the great thing is you'll be able to pull that window up and fix it later. And we're going to do that. So you can see that too.
All right, let's go ahead and click close and load and send our data back to Excel.
I love this so much. It's amazing. We now have a great table that has both of the years all combined. It's in a table, so we get all the nice table benefits. It's awesome.
We can scroll down. As you can see, we've got our 2023 data merged or appended with our 2024 data. One thing though, take a peek at the bottom down here.
Got some duplicate tabs down there. Yeah.
Yes, we've got our two tabs that have our data in the original format, and then we've got some tabs down here. Remember when we kept those two queries? Yes, so we do want to get rid of some of this duplicate information. We're going to take a look at this queries and connections pane over here. If you're missing your queries and connections pane, let me show you how to get that first. The first thing to do is to click on your data tab and just notice I've got my queries and connections button turned on. So go ahead and get that on if you don't already.
It's always good if you accidentally close that pane all the time. Just hit that close button and then be searching my tabs to bring it back up.
Yes. So with our total years here, we can change some of these settings. On 2024, I'm going to right click on top of it, and you'll notice it grabs all of our data here in 2024. And the big thing that I'm going to change is our load to. So this is a setting that would come up in that close and load to that we were talking about earlier. But I'm going to go ahead and select load to.
I like that Microsoft gives you the option to do it here too. So if you pick the wrong one when you're in Power Query, you don't have to redo the whole thing. You just fix it right here.
That's right. And we are going to only create the connection. So we are unable to delete this data because we used it in the Power Query editor, but we are able to just enable the load as, hide it. It's creating the connection in the background.
And you're good to hit OK here, right? It's always just a little warning saying, hey, if you used this in a visual or something like that, you're disappearing your data. So that visual's not going to work there.
We're going to do the same thing with 2023. Right click. We're going to adjust this load to setting to creating a connection only and finalize with OK. All right. And just like that, our data is hidden.
You can delete these sheets now. They're totally blank sheets. Deleting the actual sheet isn't going to delete the data. It's just kind of cleaning up your view. And you don't want to delete the original sources either because those, again, feed into it. So you can always hide those sheets if you really want to. But you can see total years is going to have everything still in there once we removed the others, hit that total years is what we're left with. And it's looking good, making it really easy to use.
Yeah, I think it's ready for a pivot table. What do you think?
I like it. I think that sounds good. Thanks for helping me out with this. I'll see you back here in a little bit because I'm going to need some more help down the line.
All right, I got you. See you then.
Angelica, thank you for coming to help me out with this data set, getting this all cleaned up. Emily and I already went into Power Query with this data and got into a much more usable format.
It's looking great.
I thank you. Thank you. I had no part in it, but thank you. I know you got some tricks up your sleeve for what we can do with our data next.
Yeah, so now that the data has been cleaned up in Power Query, one of the next steps in this entire process would be to start considering our data model and how we can really enhance it. So far we have our total years table here, and that's here now with us. We have this queries and connections pane over here on the right-hand side. What we can do is we can now take this into Power Pivot. And there's a couple of ways to do that. But before we do that, we first need to make sure we have Power Pivot available.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
Tell me about Power Pivot, please.
Yes. So a lot of times when we're teaching either a class on Excel, Power BI or Excel, especially our Excel bootcamp, we often get questions about where's Power Pivot? How do I use it? How do I enable it? Well, Power Pivot is an add-in. And so we'll go ahead and enable that here in a second, but let's talk a little bit about Power Pivot and what it can do. Power Pivot, just like Power Query, will launch in a separate window once we have it added in. And it's a really impressive feature and tool.
Nothing to do with pivot tables, so just similar names there.
Similar names. We know how Microsoft uses those similar names, but Power Pivot allows you to handle significantly larger data sets a lot easier. It's going to allow you to create more complex data models because it's going to allow you to build relationships, which can enhance your data analysis and what you're able to do. And it will even allow us we'll be able to create advanced DAX calculations and calculations to enhance our model. So let's get Power Pivot in here and start using it. So one of the first things we have to do is select File in the left-hand side, and then we'll go ahead and select Options. And this is going to bring up that Excel Options window. Now, towards the bottom of this pane, we'll see Add-ins. So we'll go ahead and select the Add-ins tab. And down here at the bottom of this section, you can see next to Manage, you see Excel Add-ins. Well, if we click Excel Add-ins, we need to change it from Excel Add-ins to COM Add-ins, and then we'll select Go. This is going to bring up that list where it's going to show us we can enable Power Pivot among some other add-ins available here. Really, the one we're focused on right now is Power Pivot. So that's the one we're going to select, and then we'll go ahead and click OK. Now it should appear for you right away, but if for some reason it doesn't, you might just need to make sure that you close and relaunch Excel. It should appear right away.
Right now and then, Excel will get glitchy about something. So just in case.
Yeah. So now we have Power Pivot available. Well, what we can do here is we can now load this query, load this table over, bring it over to Power Pivot, and we can look at our model a bit further. And there's a couple of ways to do that. We can right click over here from the queries and connections pane. We can right click that total years query. So we can right click that and then select load to, or even easier, over here in our ribbon at the top, if we select Power Pivot, we have this add to data model button, and we love a quick click. So let's go ahead and select add to data model. All right, so it'll load, it'll take a second, and then it's going to populate our only table right now in Power Pivot. Notice again, of course, it is a separate window, so you'll have that open separate from your Excel window.
Bonus points, anyone in the chat, your points don't get you anything. But if you remember what I said that row limit was, put it in now, because now if you had those multiple years of like sales data or what have you, and you're maxing it out, you'd be able to see all of those rows in here seamlessly.
Yes. And that's what's wonderful about Power Pivot is it doesn't have that hard to find row limit that that million row limit, like Excel does, it's going to be based on a few factors, a variety of factors, and how it's going to perform and run. And it's based on your RAM on your machine, the processing power in your machine, as well as your data model size, and any, DAX calculations will affect the performance, of course, but it's going to well exceed that million row limit that we encounter in Excel without using Power Pivot. So we have three main tabs up here at the top of the Power Pivot window: Home, Design, and Advanced. We're mostly going to live here in the Home tab for now, so we'll go ahead and take a look and talk about that. And I want to bring your attention to the View grouping down here. Currently, you can see we have the Data View enabled, and that's where we're looking at our data in that standard tabular format with our columns and rows. We even have the ability to filter and sort here. But if we go ahead and select the diagram view, look at what we have. It'll take a moment to load, and when it does, you'll see we have a new window view, really a new view here, and we can see our table. Now it's represented here in this box, but we can see all of our columns here as well. Now, here is where we're going to add something fun. And so we're going to enhance our model, and we're going to add to our model. And I'd like to add to our model a table, a new table that I think is pretty vital to almost every single data model that I can think of any use cases. But here is where, if we had other sources connected, other connections in here, other tables, we would view those tables here as well. So let's go ahead and add in that table. Now, the table I want to add is that date table. So to do this, it's really easy in Power Pivot. It's probably one of my favorite ways to create and add a date table based on the dates from your model. And that's up here in the Design tab, we'll find that date table option. So we can hit the drop down there and then just select New. And in moments, we'll see it's going to load that new table just like magic. Starts with that full date column, and then it gives us all of these other columns, including a date hierarchy as well. So let's talk a little bit about what this is going to help us do, right?
For sure.
For anyone who hasn't used a date table or hasn't used it in this way, but it's going to allow us to add to the model and be able to filter. Instead of just single table filtering from the total years table, we can now connect this to other tables if we had another table that we were tracking our data that we were interested in.
And what's great is we don't have to combine this in all to the same table, right? We did 2 separate years of data. That made sense to combine together because it was the same data, just over more time, just over more rows.
Right.
But this is similar, but not identical data. It's more information about this financial data that we're tracking. So while we could put it in the same table, it would lead to a really big table size, whereas having 2 separate tables is going to be more efficient in the long run.
Absolutely. It would blow up this table if we tried to achieve all of these columns over here. It's one of the biggest questions we always get. Why am I going to add an additional table when I already have that date column? Well, now in addition, we have not just the year, but we have month number. We have this month year column as well. And we also have a few others here that could be beneficial to our analysis later. Well, before we are able to really use this data with this new table that we've added, we need to connect these tables. They need a way to talk to each other. And so we need to create a relationship. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that here. One would be to select this Create Relationship button, and it's going to open up this relationship editor. We could select our total years table here, and then you'll see it's even kind of automatically detecting the columns that are going to relate to one another. But there's an even simpler way. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here just to show both ways.
I love the easy way.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
A quicker click, right? So we can drag and drop from one table to another. So you can start from the calendar table and drag that date column over to the date column on your total years table. And we can do this in the reverse. So we can go from the total years table date column, dragging that over to the calendar table and dropping that on that date column as well. So we have a couple of ways to do that here. And now we see this line appears, and there's a couple of symbols here, this asterisk, there's a directional arrow, and we have that number 1. So This is showing us that the relationship type here is that many-to-one relationship, which really just indicates that on the total years table, there are multiple records of the data that we're looking at. And on the calendar table, there are unique instances, single records on that side. So it's looking at the data in the two columns that the relationship is created on, and it's letting us know what instances there are. Multiple, many on the total year side, and then just single unique records on the date side, on that calendar side.
And you can, of course, also have a many-to-many relationship or a one-to-one, but many-to-one really is the best one. It works really in the most situations that you're going for. And that arrow we can see is pointing from our calendar to our financial data, because that is essentially describing, right? The dates is just giving us some more information about the data that is in that total years. And that's why we see that arrow icon.
Yeah. So now we've got our two tables that we want to have just for this model, and we've related the data so they're talking to each other. Now we can create from Power Pivot, we can go ahead and create a pivot table. So
not related, but awesome to go for from now.
So on our home tab, we can navigate over to the home tab, and you can see there is a button here. So we have this pivot table button, which is another one of those two-part buttons. Oftentimes the two parts are giving you a shortcut with the icon at the top, but the drop down, if we just take a quick look, has some additional options. You can create a pivot table. We could try to go for a pivot chart from here, but notice the icon next to pivot table matches the one up top. So we can just go ahead and select that pivot table icon up top to create this pivot table. Now, we get the option here to select a new worksheet or an existing worksheet.
I always like new. I just feel like it gets too cluttered when it's on the same one as all of the data. Even though this is kind of a narrow one, I just always find it easier to do new.
I agree, and I think it's cleaner. So let's go ahead, we'll select new worksheet, and that way we don't have to worry about anything getting funky here. So now we have a fresh new worksheet to look at, and we can rename this here in just a moment. So over here on the right-hand side, we have this pivot tables field, and we can see our calendar table that we just added from Power Pivot. We can see here we have our total years table. That's the one we cleaned up in Power Query with Allison and Emily earlier. And you can see there's table 1 below here, but that's just from the initial load of the data when we pulled it in. You can see that they're separated by this very kind of faint gray line here. And these are the two tables that we're going to use, the ones that were loaded here into our model. So one of the first things that I would like to do from the calendar table, I'm going to expand the more fields here, and I want to bring the month into my columns. So slowly we're going to drag and drop these fields in and start to build out our pivot table. And it's going to take shape here as we go through. The next field I'd like to add from that calendar table again is year, and we're going to drag and drop that down into our rows.
What I love so much with pivot tables is if you realize you don't like the layout as stuff goes in there, so easy to move it about and redo what you want. Which, even though we're going to create essentially a version of that original table that was our source, we have so much more flexibility with it. Yeah, and we can move it with like a click of a button.
Just a simple click. All right, let's go to that total years table, and we're going to pull in from this, we're going to pull value and drop value into values. And this is interesting. So far, we're looking at our 2 years broken down by month, and we can see we have all of this data here. Now, the other thing that we can do, which I love, and I know we've touched on this here, is we can bring in additional fields and we can modify this. So I'd like to grab category and bring this down into the rows and look at that. That is really interesting. It really opens up what we can see for the breakdown for each year, looking at the cost of goods sold, year-to-year expenses, budget, income budget, taxes, total operating expenses. And we also have these nice totals, the grand total here across all of our columns from the entire year for each of these categories. And then we also have the totals across the month. So we have a really interesting way to view this. And we didn't have to go in and write any formulas.
Yeah, and it's so great because you can move things over. So if you want to see a different total of something, just move the data around to achieve that. This is fantastic. This is so much better than what we started with not even that long ago, right? It hasn't even been an hour yet, and we already have a much easier to work with, more accurate, more detailed version of our data. I can take this now and do lots of other stuff with it, right? I can use a lot more of the Excel features at this point if I wanted to start with it. You also, like Emily, have an Excel class on our On Demand where you go a lot more in depth than just a wide variety of Excel features.
Yeah. So in the class that I have on our platform, we really get into all of those Excel fundamentals, looking at formulas and functions and the setup of that really, as well as just different ways to enter your data. We then take it into Excel and look further into creating some of those different charts, as well as the importance of formatting as a table. So really a lot of those Excel basics, but really expanding on the conversation and talking about the why and the importance of them and showing a few extra keyboard shortcuts in there as well.
Ugh, keyboard shortcuts are so helpful. They're so key.
Love a keyboard shortcut.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this part. I will definitely probably need your help in a little bit when I get to some more steps here.
Awesome. Can't wait.
So we now have a pivot table. Remember, just a little while ago, we started this off with 2 separate sheets with each one kind of not the most ideal layout, and our data spread across those, and we had to try to make sense of it, use insights. Now, we have our data in a pivot table, and we were just going through, right? We can modify this pivot table, move these fields around, right? If I want to move category over to the month, for instance, right? Move the month below that. You can move this around as much as you like, play with it as much as you need to get those totals exactly where you need them to be. I'm going to move category right back to where I had it over in my rows. And right, this is a good point where you need to decide what is the point of this data, right? Who is using this? What do they need to see with their data? Because you kind of have a few courses of actions. This may be it, right? This may be great. Your data, you have that cleanup table, you have your pivot table. That is it. This would be your stopping point and you're fine right here. You might want to go a step further and you might think, you know what, I actually want to see my data in some visuals. We decided when we were taking it out of Power Pivot to put it into a pivot table, but I'd also like to see it in a chart. So let's do that. So I'm going to use my pivoted data as the source because when I get to use that pivoted data, I have access to all of my totals. And because I have all of these totals, I then don't have to create separate calculations for them to show in those visuals. So on your insert ribbon, we have a whole visual section here in our charts. Now we've got bar charts, we've got line charts, we've got a bunch of different options. What I always like to do is go to the recommended charts because then you'll be able to see really easily how does my data look in these charts without having to commit to one right off the bat. So we'll see a pop-up window and it will show, hey, we've got column charts, line charts, pie charts, and how is the data that we have currently in this pivot table going to look in this particular visual. So I've got a column chart, got line charts, pie charts. Now I could go on forever about why I don't love pie charts, but we're just gonna skip on over to bar charts. And you can click through and see all of the different options, see the easy ability to move your data into any of these visuals. I'm just going to stick with that very first one, that clustered column chart, because I want to show you how we can modify that because right now it does look a little bit busy. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And you can move that around your visual. You can also copy this, put this on a separate sheet. So if you want to have just a dashboard here in Excel of all your visuals, you can do that on a separate sheet. I have another Learn with the Nerds where I go through building out a dashboard in Excel, talking about all the things you need to consider, and we go a lot more in depth in the design of the dashboard and the different visuals that we added. Right now, we can see all of the options, the categories, the years, the month, everything that is included in this pivot table is in this chart. Now, if I want to change that, I'm going to have to come over here to my pivot table and remove any of the elements that I don't want to see, right? I've got a lot going on. Maybe I no longer care about the month. So if I take out the month, my visual makes a lot more sense, but I also lose some of that data that I was seeing from the pivot table, because the pivot table and that chart are tied together. So kind of pros and cons to using that pivot table as your source. Definitely the ideal to do in Excel, but you got some things to work through. Now, that is where, back in the day, Power View was added in. Power View was added in to make visualization easier in Excel. And then after a while, Microsoft's like, wait, why are we adding all of these things into Excel? Why are we overloading this one program? Granted, it's Excel, it's everyone's go-to, but why are we trying to cram all these features into this one program? Why don't we make another program that's specifically designed for visuals to create really stunning interactive reports? So that is where Power BI, probably a decade ago now, was born. Power BI Desktop takes Power Query. So everything that we did earlier with Emily in Power Query, you can do 100% in Power BI. Power Query lives as a pop-up in that program as well. Then everything we just did with Angelica in Power Pivot, that lives in the data modeling in Power BI. And we have a much smoother, cleaner, more amazing way to create interactive multi-page reports. And we're going to go over now to Power BI to do that. So make sure, if you have not yet already done so, hit save on your file. We want to make sure that everything that we did up to this point is saved. And then you need to close this file, because if this file is open, when we then go to bring it into Power BI, it's not going to work. So we got to make sure that this file is closed. So we're going to have no issues importing our data into the Power BI desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that X to close down Excel. And then I'm going to open up the Power BI desktop. Now again, Power BI was built from Excel. It's built from the same components. It's built essentially as an add-on, just a standalone program where you are able to, if you decide to go this far in your data journey, right? Sometimes you can just stop with the pivot tables and that is fine. But if you want to keep going, you want to build really amazing reports, hey, head out of Excel, head over to what Microsoft has created specifically for you to do that. So I already have Power BI Desktop downloaded. If you do not have Power BI Desktop downloaded at this time, pause me right now. Go to the Windows Store and download that. Some of you may need to go to a separate spot provided by your organization to download the Power BI Desktop. Once you have the Power BI Desktop downloaded, I'm going to go ahead and search in my search bar for Power BI. Right? If you're not sure where it's at, generally I have this pinned to my taskbar so I can see this anytime I need it. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Power BI Desktop. Once this loads, I'm going to go ahead and click on blank report here at the top just to go in and have a nice blank slate to start from. Now, I know if you're brand new to Power BI, learning a new program can be pretty intimidating, but I'm going to walk you through that once we pull our Excel data in, and you're going to really see all the similarities to Excel. So to bring in your data, you will notice we have Get Data, the same button that we used when we were over in Excel to take our data into Power Query. And this does the exact same thing here in the Power BI Desktop. I could click on this Get Data button. It would take me to all of those connectors. I could go out to wherever my data is stored, bring it in, go into the Power Query editor, make all those super awesome updates and edits to it, including using column from example. And then when I'm done, I could bring it down here to the desktop to make my report. Well, since we already did that step, I don't want to have to replicate that. So what I want to do is I want to import in my Excel file with all of the changes that we already did. So to import in a file from Excel, you're going to go over to File in the top left corner, and then you're going to come all the way down, about halfway down to Import. When you select Import, you've got a few options for where your data could be coming from. We're going to go with the very last one, Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View. Recognize those names, right? We have done things from Power Query. We've done things in Power Pivot. And so we're bringing in that data that we cleaned and worked with in there. So select that last option. and navigate through to where you have that stored. Mine's hanging out on my desktop. We're going to select that Excel file, go navigate to wherever you saved your file and hit open. You'll now get a alert saying, hey, we're in a new program. We're in Power BI. So this is no longer going to be an Excel file. This is going to be a Power BI file. Go ahead and click start. And it's going to bring in your data, and you get to choose whether you want to keep a connection to that data or copy that data in and really start your Power BI report. We're going to select that option. We're going to just hit copy data for this one. It's going to work some magic, and there we go. We have now successfully imported in our Excel file. You'll see we have a few sections. There is a query section, and even though we hid or disabled the load of those original tables, they're still there hanging out in the background as the original sources of our data. We can see it's brought over our data model that we did in Power Pivot with Angelica, and we have both of the tables that we built our relationship together. The final thing that we have is KPIs and measures, and we can see that there is a sum of value. Well, this is coming from our pivot table. When we pulled the value column into the value field in our pivot table, it created an aggregation of that. Now, sum is the default aggregation that is performed. We can always adjust that if we wanted in our pivot table to be different from that. But that creates an actual calculation for us, right? It's a formula essentially. And that is why we have our sum of value listed here. Let's go ahead, hit close, and let's do that quick tour around the Power BI desktop. So if this is your first time in the Power BI desktop, kind of get a good feeling of where everything is at. I would also highly suggest we have a Learn with the Nerds specifically on taking you from a Power BI beginner to a Power BI Pro, and I highly suggest we'll have that linked for you. Definitely take this one if you're looking to expand those Power BI skills. But let's talk about what we have going on just so you are comfortable as we're walking through building this out. Now, on the left side, you will see 4 icons, and these are called views. The first one is where we're at right now, and that is our report view. This is your canvas. I can make that smaller, essentially just zoom out at the bottom. I can see this is the space, right? It's a 9:16 ratio. That's super common. It's really the same size as a PowerPoint. And see, right, that's a very standard report size, and that is the space that we will have to build our report here in the Power BI desktop. Back over to the left, the next icon down is our table view. And this, again, remember this program came from Excel. This is just like Excel. We have our rows, we have our columns. I can switch over on the right in my data pane. I can switch between my calendar table, that's that date table that Angelica created in Power Pivot, and my table of all of the financial data that we cleaned up in the Power Query Editor. We can see all of those things I can sort through if I want to sort ascending, descending, add any filters, or just do some, diving in, exploring of my data in here. Moving down is the last view we'll look at. That's our model view. And look at this. This comes right from Power Pivot. So we can see we have our years table, we have our calendar table, we can see we have that one-to-many relationship where that calendar table, that date table is describing and filtering down to our main financial table. We'll also notice up at the top, we have the same ribbon structure that is present in Excel, really almost all Microsoft programs. So hopefully as you kind of click around, see these different areas, you'll see the similarities to Excel especially, and also really all of Microsoft, and that will make you a little bit more comfortable using this program, and hopefully it demystified it a little bit for you. So my goal now is to build a quick report with my data. I started this in Excel, right? We put our data into the pivot table. I built a visual off of that, but it wasn't really the most intuitive. I didn't have a ton of options to modify the visual, and everything was kind of synced together. So if I added additional visuals, they all would have had that same information, and it wouldn't really be telling me anything new or different in any unique way. But that's the beauty of Power BI, is that I have all of the data over here, and then I get to pick and choose which data I want to see in which visual. And as long as the data is connected in that relationship in that data model, I can use it together as much, as little, however I would like. Let's go ahead now and use some visuals. So over on the right side of your screen, this is where your panes are at, and you can expand or collapse any of these panes. Your visualization pane is going to have all of the different little visuals, all of the different ones we're able to use. You can also bring in custom visuals as well, and we go over that in our Beginner to Pro Power BI Learn with the Nerds. For now, I'm going to keep it simple, right? I am going to bring over that bar chart. We started with a really similar one and tried to get that bar chart or column chart in Excel. And that was not the greatest. So let's see how we can do that better here in Power BI. So I'm going to click on my very first visual, just a stacked bar chart. And once you have your visual on the page, you are able to move it around. As long as I click on it and I can see these little grabber icons on the side, I know that I can resize this, move it wherever I would like. You have really full creative abilities with this. I'm going to resize it to a little bit more reasonable size. And let's bring over our category. And let's use that sum of the value, that calculation that was created by the pivot table. Now I have my value field here, which is a column, and I could use the value column and I would get the identical result. However, it is just going to be a little bit more efficient, a little bit quicker if I use that calculation that was created. So I'm going to go ahead and use that sum of the value. So I clicked on category, and Power BI in its wisdom put that into the y-axis. So now for my sum of the value, I have a few ways I can add this in. I can hit the check mark right here, and Power BI will again just figure out where it thinks it should go. I could drag it directly into the field if I know which one I want to put it in. If you're new to putting data into visuals and you're like, I have no idea if this is the y-axis, the x-axis, the legend, you can also just drop it in just straight to the visual. This essentially does the same exact thing as hitting the check mark next to it, where it will indicate, hey, just put this wherever you think it goes. So you can see we have the category field in our y-axis and the sum of the value in our x-axis. And now I have a really easily built out visual that shows me, hey, here is the category and here's how much money, right, is tied to each one of those categories. I want you to go ahead and click off that visual. So just click into the background one time. That will deselect it. Again, if you have it selected, you have those little grabber icons, just click off it into the background one time. And then we're going to be good to add in another visual. If I have this visual selected and I click on any of these other ones, it's going to turn it into that visual. We don't want to do that. Good thing is though, right, if I change it to something different and I'm like, oh, meant to have a fully separate visual, not the same one. Guess what? Unlike Power Query, we do have undo here. So I could do that Control Z, I could hit the undo button and it would go right back to where it needed to be. So I'm going to click off of that one time. And now I'm going to let's add in a line chart. I always like to see when I have my data going across time, I like to see that in a line chart because sometimes it's really easy to identify trends when you are seeing that data across time spread out in a line chart. So I'm going to grab the line chart. For me, that is a visual that is right below the one I just used. But if your visualization pane is a little bit wider and your icons are looking a little bit different, feel free just to hover over each icon, see that text that pops up, and grab the one that you would like. So I'm going to grab that line chart, and I know I wanted to see my data across time. So I'm going to go ahead and in my date table, that calendar table, I am going to get the month, and I'm going to grab the month and just drag and drop that onto my visual. And then I am going to bring in that same calculation, that value sum, and pull that into my y-axis. So now I am seeing my data and I can see trends across time. So if I'm identifying as a business, right, what months are my busiest, which ones are the least busy, I'm easily able to see across a year how that works. Well, I actually have 2 years of data. So this is 2 years of data in one. Maybe 2023's data looks a little bit different than 2024. So I'm going to go ahead actually, and I'm going to bring the year. I'm going to grab the year from my date table, and I'm going to grab year, and I'm going to bring that down to my legend. What that's going to do is going to give me 2 lines. And there we go. I can now see, all right, here's how we were doing in 2023 versus 2024. Really similar, but just a little bit different. There's a few times where they'll overlap and kind of swap. So you can identify, right, how those years are doing for across each month, where there's those similarities, right? I should be expecting, what is this month right here? June, right? June and September, we're doing really great. So I should be paying attention to what's going on in June and September. Well, something that I also like to point out is each of these visuals is easily able to serve essentially as a filter to the other visual. So right now, this is totaling all of the values. So every number that I have is currently added into that value total. Well, what if I just want to see income separately? All I have to do is click on each item in that category visual. I go over to the expense budget. I could go to the cost of goods sold, and it will show me the breakdown for every single one of these items, even taxes, right? See, we really aren't paying taxes very much in August. You can see those breakdowns by the category and these visuals, right? Even though they have, different information. I'm tracking one across time and one is just a category. They're seamlessly working together to give me a better picture of what's going on in my data, going as detailed as I would like to see that data. Now, I also want to show you one other visual in here, and that is called a matrix visual. Now, a matrix visual, let me make sure I deselect so I don't accidentally change one of these. A matrix visual is just like a pivot table in Excel. And they've even done updates in the past year or so to make the matrix visual behave even more so like a pivot table. So if you're used to doing pivot tables in Excel, creating a matrix in Power BI, a very similar process. So over in our visualization pane, the matrix, it looks like a partially filled in, a little bit blue filled in table. And you can see you hover over it, you can see the name and make sure you're clicking the correct visual. And I'm just gonna, again, we can resize. So I'm gonna just make that take up the whole bottom area. Just like the pivot table in Excel, we now have a rows, a columns, and a value section. And we're able to pull in any of these columns of data into those rows. And just like the pivot table, we can move them around, play with them to get whatever look and feel we would like. So let's kind of replicate that same pivot table, see how it behaves the same and also somewhat different in Power BI. So I know I want my years, so let's grab the years. And I'm gonna just hit the check mark next to each of these and let Power BI put it wherever it wants to go, and we can always move it. I'm gonna click on year, I'm gonna click on month, and those are both from my calendar table. I'm also gonna grab that category and that sum of the value, that sum calculation from my total years. Now we can see over here, we're seeing both of the years and the whole month. Well, if I open up each of the years, I will see the different categories inside of it. If I have a particular year selected, I'll see the two visuals above are now only going to show me the data for 2023. Or if I click on 2024, there's 2024's, and we can see how that behaves. If I want this to be a little bit different of a layout, right, again, I can move this around. So if I don't want category to be below year, maybe I want month to be below year and category to be in my columns. Well, feel free, move it around, play around with that data to get the layout that you would like. And the beauty of the matrix visual here in Power BI versus the pivot table is I can put my data in here in any order I would like, and it's not going to mess up my other visuals, right? Those other visuals aren't created reliant upon the matrix visual. And while they will all work together, it is not going to break, right? If I move like the month out of here, the month isn't going to disappear from my line chart. I'm going to flip-flop month and category back because I actually did like that better. Let's flip-flop category under years and month to our columns. I'm okay with this layout. Let's go ahead and save this. And again, this gets saved as a Power BI file. So I'm going to click on File up at the top left and come down to Save As. You can also just click that Save icon. It will bring you here. And I'm going to hit Browse this device. And I'm just going to save this onto my desktop. And I'll call this Excel to Power BI. Notice I have an Excel file of the same name, but no worries. This is actually saved as a PBIX, which is the Power BI file type. And we're going to go ahead and hit Save. All right, I'm going to bring back Angelica and Emily to help me out with this last part of taking my data to the Power BI service. We're going to talk about what is that, and then how can I take my data from the Power BI service and then utilize that in Excel. Welcome back, Angelica. Thanks for coming to help me out with this and taking this data now to kind of collaborate. Like, I want to work with others. I want to show others what I've made. And I know you can help me take it there.
Yeah. So once you're done developing your report in the Power BI desktop, and most of your development will occur in the Power BI desktop, there's just more functionality, a lot more features available, flexibility in terms of cleaning up the data and things. And we pulled it
just
in.
Like Excel for the web versus the Excel desktop. Excel desktop, you can just do more stuff. Like Power Query is not in Excel for the web, sadly.
So one of the first things you're going to do when you're ready to publish is you can hit that publish button, and it's going to prompt you to possibly do two things. It may prompt you to save if you haven't saved recently, and it may prompt you to sign in. But you can see we are currently signed into Allison's account here. So we're going to be publishing to Allison's workspace, and we'll talk about that in our workspaces here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and hit publish and get this ready to go. You can see we've clicked around. So we've got to save, which is, I love this. I love the reminder to save.
You always want that latest and greatest to go.
Yes. So we'll go ahead and click save, give that a second. And here is where it's going to ask the destination, where we want to publish this to. Well, I think we should publish this up to my workspace so we can talk a little bit about that experience. And so everyone will have a my workspace, and you can search for that within your list of workspaces. Now, the list of workspaces that will appear here will vary individual to individual, because these are the workspaces that are available that have been shared with or created for the user who is signed in. So my workspace list
will look a little different than mine. We probably have some overlap though.
There's some that we have shared alike, but many that we've created individually or just have been shared with us individually. But let's go ahead, everyone, let's select that my workspace, because this is where you can publish those reports and you can kind of test them out, interact with them a bit more, see how they're really working and performing in the workspace in the Power BI service before you then think about sharing these with others.
Yeah. And also feel free, anyone, to pause if you're signing in at this point, trying to get your name in, and you're like, wait, I've never used Power BI before, and I've got some extra different windows here asking me some more information before I can get to this publishing screen.
So when you're ready, make sure you have that My Workspace available. You'll click select, and it'll take a moment to load and publish up to the service. But once it's published, you're going to see a link here, and don't click got it, because I want you to select this hyperlink here. Open the report, Excel to Power BI, in the Power BI service. So
now the Power BI service can seem so confusing. It's like, what in the world is this, the Power BI service? Really, it's just the web version of Power BI, right? We have the web version of Excel, the web version of PowerPoint, but the web version of Power BI is a lot more powerful, and it really has two components, right? We have the ability to build reports like we did in a limited fashion, but it's so much more. And the collaboration ability, right, creating reports and then sharing it with others is the key point and aspect that people use PowerBI.com, the Power BI service, for.
Right. So once we click this hyperlink here now, you'll see it's going to open up that report for you in the service of Power BI. And mine's launching on a separate window. So I'm going to pull that over onto this monitor over here so we can take a look. So it looks similar to what we were looking at in the desktop.
You can click anything, right? And it's all going to interact just like we showed, right? If we wanted to see those different amounts as we did when we were building it. The beauty, though, of having it published is that now no one's actually moving things, deleting things, changing things around. It's kind of locked, and you can get a lot more into this, doing security roles and saying who can see what and change what and do what. We go a lot more in depth on a lot of our on-demand classes. We'll have linked for you in there if you want to learn more.
So like Allison said, we now have this published here to the service, and we can think about things like security. And right now we have it just in the My Workspace. But if we wanted to bring this into another workspace, like a collaborative or shared workspace, we've got to think about what license is required for that. Because right now, many of you might be using the trial license or the free license, which will give you access to a My Workspace for you to publish your own reports just for your access and your viewing. But if you want to share with others, that is where that Power BI Pro license comes into play. And there's a couple of different licensing options, and we won't go too deep into that. That could be its whole separate video. And we do have some content out there available. But the main licenses are the Power BI Pro and the Power BI Premium, which is sometimes referred to in the community as Pro Plus, because it's just gives you a few extra features and capabilities, access to a few things that you can do either a little more frequently or go into
more data,
handle more data. Exactly. So again, right now we are in that My Workspace. And if I click into the My Workspace, you'll see we have the report and the semantic model. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But in the My Workspace, again, everyone will have access to this. Everyone can publish their own reports here. If you wanted to collaborate with others, that's when you would need to go and create an additional workspace. And you can do that from right down here when you select workspaces and new workspace. You can then create a collaborative workspace or access.
Yeah, and definitely as some organizations, that's restricted. They don't want everyone out there making tons of workspaces because it's going to cost some money. So that may be restricted for you, which is why we have you putting it into your My Workspace today.
Absolutely. Now, when we are looking here in the My Workspace, I see there are two objects with the same name, the report and the semantic model. And this is extremely beneficial to not just you for additional reports that you may want to create, but to anyone else that you may want to create reports off of that data model. So the difference between these two objects, the report, as we saw, contains all of our visual elements, everything that we want our end users to see to help with their analysis and to interact with. The semantic model contains our entire data model. It contains the tables, it contains any calculations that we wrote, and it contains the relationships, obviously, between those tables. So when it comes to any new data being added to our data source, we need to look into refreshing that. And that's where you can use the on-demand refresh now button on the semantic model, or you can possibly schedule the refresh. So that's another huge benefit of publishing this to the service is we have that manual refresh option in the desktop. We can refresh from there, but publishing here to the service also gives us the capability to schedule out that semantic model refresh, which is going to push onto the report connected to the semantic model.
And it's great too when we get, all of our 2025 data added to that Excel spreadsheet, then we can go back, have it go through all the same Power Query steps we did, and then we can make sure everything stays up to date and we have all the same visuals. We'll just have that new data whenever we get it added in. For this data set, For me, I have my Excel file saved to my desktop. Some of you may have put it onto your OneDrive or a separate drive. Well, something that you need to consider when you're setting up a data refresh is where your data is stored, because if it is saved on your local machine, you have to download kind of like a bridge to get from the cloud, where we're at here in the Power BI service, down to your local machine. So to give it the permissions, give it the pathway so it can go get that extra data and have that extra step. You can download a data gateway right here by clicking that download link and going to Data Gateway. And that can be a really long discussion and process. Some people's organizations might not allow them to do personal gateways. You might have to use an enterprise gateway, lots of different factors. I actually have a YouTube video that came out a little while ago. We'll link that one. So that goes a lot more in depth about things to consider with keeping that data up to date. But it is always good to consider that and make that a part of your process when you are making any reports where you're like, there's a potential for new data, and I want to make sure I'm not rebuilding this report every year when that new data gets here.
Right.
Angelica, thank you for joining me today. I very much appreciate you helping me get this report all the way here published to the service. This is fantastic. I can now do so much more with my data. That's exciting. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Emily, welcome back. I need your help because I have a report in Power BI and my boss now said he wants to see this in Excel. Is there a way to work backward?
There sure is. As a Power BI trainer, it's a question I get quite often. I'm sure you do too.
Just a little.
I'm going to walk you through how to bring your data from Power BI back into an Excel worksheet. Sound good?
I love it. I love that they work together. It's amazing. Makes our lives easier.
It sure does. All right, we're going to go ahead right here in your My Workspace where you published your report. We're going to click the ellipses right next to our report and click Analyze in Excel. It's that simple.
I love it. And Microsoft makes it so easy. They give it to us on the report. We can be viewing the report. We have the button. We have it on the semantic model. They're really like, just go. Take it to Excel if you want it.
All right, and just like that, here we are.
Amazing.
We're in Excel. You'll notice we've got our pivot table sitting here, but we don't have any data. And we actually have to decide what we want to bring in.
And sometimes, depending on your security settings and stuff, you might have that enable content warning. You might not. If you do, just click away. And we're on the web, but you can take this to the desktop. So if you want to do desktop stuff, do have access to stuff that's not in the web version, you can definitely go to the editing drop down and click on open in desktop, and that will just take it on over there. So if you like that better, go for it.
Yeah, we're just going to leave it here in the web. It's fine how it is, but you always have that option.
Sure.
As you can see, our tables went ahead and came on in, and we can bring in all of those same fields that we had earlier when we were building our pivot table. And just like that, we're going to go ahead and bring in the year. We're going to bring in the category, also our month, and then that sum of values. And you'll notice as I check the box, they just dropped into whatever fields they wanted. If I want to make it look exactly how it looked in our previous table, we could drag our year down to our rows.
That's what I love with pivot tables. It makes it so easy just to get whatever layout you want to get those insights that you need.
Yeah, super helpful. All right, and believe it or not, there is another way that you can bring your data into Excel. If you've just got a blank worksheet and you want to bring it in from there, you don't even have to have powerbi.com open. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in a blank Excel worksheet, and we're going to start from scratch. I'm going to make this full screen. All right, and now that we've got our blank Excel worksheet open, we can go ahead and go to the Data tab. We can click on Get Data in the top left. We're going to get data from the Power Platform, and we're going to get it from Power BI.
I love that it's so integrated and easy to get to right here in Excel. And it's one of those features, I don't think anyone knows all the features in Excel. I know that I'm always finding new ones in there that they've been there. They're hanging out, ready to go whenever you need them.
Yeah, Power BI and Excel are meant to work together, so it's really great. we're going to go ahead and type up here and type in Excel to Power BI. There we go. We've got our Excel to Power BI inside of my workspace. That's the one I'm looking for. So instead of opening it up and dropping it into a pivot table, we also have this second option right here. Insert table. Here we go.
So this is cool. It looks just like Power BI. We have essentially a little mini Power BI right here in this pop-up.
Yes. So right here in the data pane, just like in Power BI, we can open up both of our tables. We can select the information that we want to bring in, as well as see how it's set up on the screen before we put it into a table. So just like that.
And that's awesome that it's pulling data from each of the tables, and we essentially can just like freehand make our own table out of all of that, even though it's technically two totally separate tables. It's just pulling it too.
And just like that, we've built our table. We've got it's returned from our Excel to Power BI file, but we've got all of the different columns that we brought in. Very, very neat feature, being able to kind of do it in reverse.
Yeah. And we can filter any of these now. We can use all of our regular Excel table features. If I only want to see a certain year or a certain month, anything like that, it's going to be, or by our categories, right? We could honestly take it from this point too, right? Let's say your coworker is the one who did all this work originally or started their project in Power BI, but now you want to take it into Excel. You can, if you're connected in that workspace or that collaborative one, you can then connect to it, bring it back to Excel, and do what you need to, right? I can even take this, have this, do a pivot table off of this, do the dashboard off this, or just investigate my data if I really want to learn about it. Thank you so much, Emily. Yeah. Thanks for coming in, helping me get my data to Power BI, and then also back here and really cleaned up and amazing to use.
Yeah, happy to be here. Learn with the nerds is the best.
Thank you for joining Angelica, Emily, and I on this data journey. We hope that you are feeling so much more confident in your data abilities from starting in Excel and not having to rely so much on writing every single formula out there. Hopefully you are now excited to play around in the Power Query Editor to really take advantage of its very powerful editing abilities in cleaning up and transforming your data. And of course, if you are tracking a large amount of rows, right, go over to Power Pivot, you will see endless rows of data. You can do advanced calculations and formulas in there. You can do your data modeling in there. We will have linked for you, of course, all of the other Learn with the Nerds related to this topic, so you can really dive in deep and learn more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel here at Pragmatic Works. We are putting out a few videos a week on all topics Microsoft. So you'll see lots of Excel, lots of Power BI, and a whole lot more. We're also doing a Learn with the Nerds every single month. And while you wait, go back and watch the years and years and years of previous Learn with the Nerds that we have for you on our YouTube channel. And hopefully I'll see you in one of those next videos.